Folks, welcome aboard Flight 2459, service to Dallas Love Field, Austin.
Southwest Airlines is simply the most legendary and successful company in modern aviation history. So almost everyone has a Southwest story, whether you're an employee working for the company or you're a devoted customer to the products that Southwest has offered for nearly 40 years.
Back then, in 1971, Southwest was just a scrappy upstart with a cheeky sense of humor.
And a schedule you could depend on.
Today, they're still cheeky, but they carry more passengers within the U.S. than any other airline, and they've been profitable every single year of their existence, even during tough times when some competitors were losing 10 to 15 million a day. Managing any business requires an understanding of how costs respond to changes in business activity and the effect of changes in costs and volume on profits. Within cost behavior analysis, companies classify costs in a variety of ways. Variable costs are costs that vary in total, directly and proportionately with changes in the activity level. So, for example, if an airline paid 10 cents a bag for peanuts and a flight had 1 passenger, the cost for peanuts would be 10 cents. If there were 50 passengers, the cost would be $5. And if there were 100 passengers, it would be $10. Variable costs may also be defined as costs that remain the same per unit at every level of activity within a relevant range. So, the per unit cost of a bag of peanuts would be the same regardless of the number of passengers on the plane. Fixed costs are costs that remain the same in total, regardless of changes in the activity level. The salary of the pilot on that flight, for example, would be the same regardless if he or she flew 50 passengers or 100. Because total fixed costs remain constant as activity changes, fixed costs per unit vary inversely with activity. As volume increases, unit costs decrease, and vice versa. Thus, if we were to calculate the pilot's salary per passenger, for 1 passenger, the fixed cost per unit would be $200. For 2 passengers, it would be $100. And for 100 passengers, it would be just $2. Today, airlines like Southwest are thought of largely as variable cost companies because fuel, often their largest cost, can fluctuate wildly in price. How significant is this particular variable cost to their bottom line? They consume 1.4 billion gallons of fuel a year, so just a 1 cent per gallon increase equals $14 million. It follows then that cost-volume profit analysis would play a key role in their planning processes. The most significant relationship in cost-volume profit analysis is the level of activity at which total revenues equal total costs, or the break-even point. A great way for a company to determine a break-even point is to prepare a cost-volume profit graph, also known, not surprisingly, as a break-even graph. Let's examine a typical airline round-trip flight. To keep things simple, we'll assume that every ticket costs $100 and that the plane has 150 seats. Okay, looking at our graph, we've got our units of sales along the horizontal axis, which in this case is seats. The vertical axis is labeled dollars because we'll use it to record both total revenues and total costs, fixed plus variable. First, we'll plot our total sales line, starting at 0 and going up to max capacity. So, total revenue for a full plane would be $100 times 150 seats, or $15,000. The revenue line here is linear throughout, since all tickets cost the same. Next, we'll plot our total fixed cost, which in this case happens to be $4,000, and it is the same at every level of activity. This represents things like the pilot's salary, overhead, and administrative costs. Our total cost line starts at the fixed cost line at 0 activity. For this flight, we'll assume a variable cost of $60 per seat. So if the plane were fully occupied, the variable cost would be $60 times 150 seats, or $9,000. And the total cost would be $9,000 in variable costs plus $4,000 in fixed costs, or $13,000. Subtracting that total cost from total revenue, we get a $2,000 profit round trip. And where do they break even? That would be here at the intersection of the total cost line and the total sales line, where at 100 seats or $10,000 in sales, Southwest covers their costs but has not yet earned a profit. Okay, now the interesting part. Southwest flights are not always full, of course. In fact, the average last year was 75% occupancy. On our graph, that translates to just $480 in profit round trip, or $240 each way. Wait, $240 in profit? Can that be true? Well, yes. In fact, the average profit for a one-way flight on Southwest last year was just slightly higher at $290. And if you divide that by their average one-way ticket price of $58, you can see that just 5 passengers per flight kept the most successful airline in the USA in the black. Why are airline margins so razor thin? Mostly because ticket prices, adjusted for inflation, are half of what they were 25 years ago, while fuel costs have skyrocketed. And that explains why most airlines now charge for checked baggage. Most, but not Southwest.
The leadership really made a courageous decision early on in this process. There were Wall Street analysts saying, "What are you doing? You're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars of incremental revenue on the table." But people don't want to feel nickeled and dimed. They don't want to come back to that.
How did Southwest make this decision? By analyzing cost behavior and cost volume profit. Southwest flies just one type of aircraft, and the resulting efficiencies give them the lowest baggage handling costs in the industry. Crunching the numbers, they predicted that the Bags Fly Free program would lead to higher occupancy rates and more revenue, and the profits would outweigh incremental revenue gained from baggage fees. And, as Brad explains, their prediction was correct.
Our leadership noted a significant share shift, more than 1%, which is about $1 billion worth of customer business shifting over to us for no reason other than the Bags Fly Free strategy.
The airline business is complex, and few companies today seem to properly manage all their fixed and variable costs, from personnel to fuel contracts to flight schedules. Southwest does it well, manages customer loyalty, and seems to have an awful lot of fun in the process.
When